Okay, let's jump right into this explainer. The Ghost Fleet, the underground empire shattering global laws. Picture this. It's February 28, 2026, the Strait of Hormuz, a massive global flashpoint.
Missiles are literally flying as a major conflict erupts between the US, Israel, and Iran. Because of this, legitimate global shipping completely halts. The world's trade essentially goes dark in this crucial channel. But if you look closely, right in the shadows, some mysterious
war zone. Well, they use spoofed signals and fake flags. Take a ship called the Hilda 1. It just killed its location transponder, vanished into the night, and miraculously reappeared on the other side. Then you have the Kuma, which quickly swapped its digital flag to a totally fraudulent Guyanese flag. Another ship, the Skywave, swapped from Comoros to Botswana right before crossing. This is not just random chaos, right? It's the highly calculated signature of a multi-billion-dollar underground empire.
Which brings us to part 1, the system of trust, and how to break it. Because to really understand how they pull this off, we have to look at how global trade actually works. And it all runs on one thing: trust.
Basically, there are 3 pillars of maritime legitimacy. To enter any major port, a ship absolutely needs these 3 things. First, legitimate paperwork. Proof of ownership, management, and insurance. Second, a registered country flag, which proves national oversight. And third, an active AIS transponder continuously broadcasting its real-time location. If you have those 3 things, designed to weaponize this system and lock out rogue nations. Historically, if countries like North Korea or Iran face sanctions, the US, EU, and UN would just revoke that trust. No insurance, no port entry. But eventually, these sanctioned nations found a massive loophole. Basically, if a vessel's operators are willing to lie and falsify data, the system is actually full of holes. So let's look at part 2, the shadow playbook, and the specific tactics.
Honestly wild. Step 1, they just turn off their transponders to disappear, and then secretly transfer millions of barrels of oil to other ships right out in the middle of the sea. Step 2, flags of convenience. They register with countries that have almost zero technical oversight, like Cameroon, the Cook Islands, or Gabon. Step 3 is what's called a ghost transformation. They literally take an old, clunky ship into an obscure shipyard, give it a new coat of paint, a new name, and a totally clean identity. They'll even digitally spoof their GPS so it looks like they're in one ocean while they're secretly loading oil in another.
And the most absurd part? When maritime intelligence analysts hunt down the registered corporate headquarters for these multi-million-dollar shipping operations, they don't find some sleek office building. Nope, they find a dusty carpet mall in Dubai, or maybe a pharmacy in Moldova, or a random shopping mall in Mumbai. It's a massive shell game, perfectly.
That takes us to part 3, the Russian explosion. This is where the Shadow Fleet goes from being a localized nuisance to a full-blown global crisis.
For a long time, this was just a few dozen ships. In early 2022, the Shadow Fleet was sitting at around 200 vessels. But then, following the invasion of Ukraine and the resulting Western sanctions, everything changed. Putin's regime suddenly bought hundreds of aging tankers to keep their oil flowing to places like China and India, completely bypassing restrictions. Within just 1 year, this fleet absolutely exploded to over 1,000 ships.
By late 2025, these unregulated ghosts were carrying an astounding 11% of the entire world's seaborne oil. Now, why does this matter to us? Well, having 11% of global energy running entirely outside of legal oversight creates massive unpredictability. That kind of volatility directly impacts energy costs.
Now, you might be thinking, if authorities know they're out there, why doesn't someone just stop them? Well, it comes down to a frustrating paradox in international law. There's a UN statute called the Right of Innocent Passage, which allows ships to pass through coastal waters. Because of this, European countries were legally paralyzed. They literally had to just stand by and watch these aging dark fleet ships sail right through the English Channel and the Danish Straits, entirely unable to block them.
But things get even darker in Part 4, sabotage and spying, the weaponization of the fleet. Because these ships aren't just carrying oil anymore, they are active weapons.
The threat got incredibly real on Christmas Day 2024. Down in the Baltic Sea, 4 critical underwater communications cables on the seafloor were suddenly shredded. When authorities tracked the marine traffic in that area, they realized an old oil tanker had just passed directly over them. That tanker was the Eagle S, and it was carrying Russian oil. And get this, the Eagle S somehow dragged its massive, heavy anchor across the seabed for nearly 90 kilometers.
The crew claimed it was just a mistake, but this perfectly fits a pattern of undersea cables mysteriously suffering damage whenever these specific vessels are nearby. They're exploiting tactics that fall strictly below the threshold of actual war to maintain plausible deniability. In fact, when a Finnish court tried to charge the crew with sabotage, they had to dismiss the case entirely for lack of jurisdiction.
And intelligence analysts have discovered things that are even more alarming. Spying equipment has actually been found on some of these vessels. What's more, some are now being protected by security guards linked to the former Russian paramilitary group Wagner. So we are seeing a terrifying blurring of the lines between standard commercial shipping and covert military operations.
Moving on to Part 5, the West strikes back, closing the loophole. Western governments finally realized they had
1,300 specific vessels made them harder to insure, but they kept sailing anyway. But eventually, the US and EU found a true game-changing loophole. They started heavily pressuring those flag of convenience countries to unregister the sanctioned ships. Once a ship is stripped of its flag, it officially becomes a stateless vessel. And under international law, a stateless ship on the open ocean is fair game. It can be legally boarded and seized by foreign militaries.
This completely shifted the dynamic in early 2026. The US, France, India, and others began aggressively boarding and seizing these stateless oil tankers. Ukraine even took it a step further, launching sea drones to physically attack shadow tankers in the Baltic Sea to halt exports. And for a moment, it worked. By February 2026, Russian oil revenues actually started falling, and Iran was forced to sell at massive discounts.
But was it a permanent victory? That brings us to Part 6, a system defeated, the unintended fallout.
Let's circle back to that 2026 Strait of Hormuz crisis. In early February, stateless ships were being seized left and right. But by late February, when Iran closed the strait, legitimate shipping totally halted, causing global oil prices to absolutely skyrocket. And remember who was still moving through the chaos? The shadow fleet. They were perfectly positioned to exclusively cash in on those surging numbers. Once the sanctions were temporarily eased to calm the markets, this underground network capitalized immensely. Russia started pulling in an extra $150 million a day in revenue, and Iran was making an extra $140 million a day. Despite all the international efforts to shut it down, this network proved to be wildly adaptable and incredibly profitable. So now it's an ongoing, chaotic cat-and-mouse game. When the US Navy imposed a blockade on the strait to intercept Iranian ships, a bunch of the shadow ships rapidly switched to flying Russian flags to avoid seizure. I mean, grabbing a stateless vessel is one thing, but seizing a ship officially flagged by a nuclear-armed state? That is a geopolitical minefield. Analysts are scrambling for new ideas, like proposing a global ban on any vessel over 25 years old. But honestly, these measures mostly just chip away at the edges.
Which leaves us with a vital question to ponder. Can international law actually adapt to stop the shadow fleet? Or is this lawless underground empire just the frightening new reality of global trade? The rules that governed our oceans for decades have been shattered, and right now, the ghost ships are navigating the pieces. Thanks for joining me on this explainer. Keep your eyes on the horizon and keep learning.